The day I followed every single safety protocol. Or how I accidentally got my nightmare boss demoted by doing exactly what he told me to do. I need to tell you all about how I accidentally got my nightmare boss demoted by doing exactly what he told me to do. This happened about 8 months ago, and I'm still processing it honestly. Grab some coffee, because this is a long one. The setup. I work as a production supervisor at a mid-sized pharmaceutical manufacturing plant in New Jersey. For those who don't know the industry, pharma manufacturing is heavily regulated. We're talking FDA oversight, GMP, good manufacturing practices, compliance, constant audits, and about 3 million SOPs, standard operating procedures, for literally everything. You can't sneeze without documenting it in triplicate. I'd been with the company for 6 years at this point. Started as a production technician, worked my way up to lead tech, then got promoted to supervisor about 2 years before this story takes place. The pay was decent, the benefits were solid, and most importantly, I genuinely enjoyed the work. There's something satisfying about being part of making medications that actually help people, you know? Our department ran 2 main production lines manufacturing a common antibiotic. My shift was days 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 4 days a week. We had about 20 technicians under our supervision, split between the 2 lines. The work was precise, sometimes tedious, but we had a good crew. People showed up, did their jobs, and we generally hit our production targets without too much drama. Then Marcus happened. Enter the antagonist. Marcus Pemberton joined our site as the new production manager in January. He came from a facility in Pennsylvania that had apparently just passed an FDA audit with flying colors, and he would not let anyone forget it. Within his first week, he'd mentioned how we did things at my last site, approximately 4,000 times. Marcus was in his late 40s, always wore suits that were slightly too nice for a manufacturing environment, and had this incredibly annoying habit of clasping his hands behind his back and rocking on his heels while talking down to you. Picture a middle management peacock, and you've got Marcus. From day one, Marcus made it clear he thought our facility was being run like a country club, his words. Never mind that we'd also passed our last 3 FDA audits without major findings, or that our production efficiency was consistently above corporate targets. Nope, we were all just lazy, complacent workers who needed a firm hand to shape us up. His first major move was implementing a new accountability system. Every supervisor now had to submit a daily report detailing exactly what we did every hour of our shift. Not just oversaw line 1 production, he wanted specifics. Where were you standing? Who did you talk to? What decisions did you make? What problems occurred and how did you solve them? My coworker Jessica, who supervised the evening shift, started calling them our homework assignments. She wasn't wrong. These reports took 30 to 45 minutes to complete at the end of already long shifts. Documentation is how we maintain standards, Marcus loved to say, again rocking on his heels with his hands clasped. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. Fine. Annoying, but fine. We adapted. The escalation begins. Things got worse in March. Marcus started showing up unannounced on the production floor, clipboard in hand, looking for violations. Not safety violations or GMP deviations, those we took seriously and self-reported. No, Marcus was hunting for stupid shit. He wrote up one of my best techs, David, for having his phone in his pocket. Company policy technically said personal electronics weren't allowed on the production floor, but literally everyone carried their phones. We weren't using them during production, they were just in our pockets in case of family emergencies or whatever. It had never been an issue. David's wife was 8 months pregnant. Policy is policy, Marcus said with a shrug when I tried to argue that this was ridiculous. If we make exceptions, the whole system falls apart. I'm sure you understand, given your position. David had to go back to his locker and deposit his phone. Every single break, he'd have to go back to the locker room to check if his wife had called. The locker room was a 5-minute walk from our production area each way. Then Marcus started nitpicking our production records. Found a batch record where one of my techs had written 7:45 a.m. for a process step that was supposed to happen at 7:30 a.m. The tech had started at 7:30, but had just written down the time when he finished documenting it, which was 15 minutes later because he'd been, actually doing the work. Marcus flagged this as a falsified record and launched an investigation. An investigation? For a 15-minute time discrepancy that was clearly just a documentation timing thing, not an actual deviation from the process. The investigation took 3 days, generated probably 50 pages of documentation, and concluded that it was an unintentional documentation error that required a coaching session for the tech. All of this for nothing that actually affected the product or process. We have to take documentation seriously, Marcus explained to me in his office. The FDA doesn't care about our excuses. They care about what's written down. I was starting to hate that smug face. The pressure builds. By April, the entire production floor was walking on eggshells. People were stressed, morale was tanking, and ironically, our efficiency numbers were starting to drop because everyone was so paranoid about making minor mistakes. Marcus's solution? More accountability. He implemented a new policy. Supervisors had to physically verify and sign off on every single batch record transition. Normally, techs would complete their steps, document them, and then the next process would begin. We supervisors would review the paperwork periodically and at the end of the batch. This system worked fine and was compliant with our SOPs. But Marcus wanted real-time verification. Every time a tech completed a manufacturing step, they had to radio for a supervisor. We had to come verify their work and documentation, sign off on it, and only then could they proceed to the next step. Do you know how many steps are in a typical batch production? Dozens. We were running 2 lines simultaneously. This meant I was literally jogging back and forth between lines all day, verifying things that didn't need real-time verification, while actual supervisor duties, like planning, problem-solving, and crew management, got shoved to the margins. I don't understand why this is a problem, Marcus said when I tried to explain that this was making us less efficient, not more. You're a supervisor. Supervising is literally your job. Are you saying you weren't doing your job before? The implication was clear. Push back, and he'd start documenting performance issues. I shut up and jogged between lines. My breaking point approaches. The thing that really started to get under my skin was how Marcus treated safety concerns. Look, pharma manufacturing involves some hazardous materials. Nothing crazy, but we worked with organic solvents, some corrosive cleaning agents, and obviously active pharmaceutical ingredients that you didn't want to be breathing in or getting on your skin. We took safety seriously. We had procedures, we had training, we had PPE, personal protective equipment, and we had a safety committee that met monthly. One of my techs, Sarah, reported that the eye wash station near line 2 wasn't working properly. The water pressure was weak. This is a big deal. Eye wash stations are emergency equipment. OSHA mandates them in areas where you work with hazardous materials. I immediately submitted a maintenance work order and sent an email to Marcus, our safety coordinator, and the facilities manager. This was proper procedure. Marcus's response email. Line 2 can continue operating. The eye wash station on the other side of the room is functional. Monitor the situation. The other eye wash station was about 150 feet away, around a corner. OSHA guidelines say eye wash stations should be accessible within 10 seconds of hazardous exposure. Our own SOPs said eye wash stations should be within 50 feet of any area where you're working with hazardous materials. I replied to Marcus's email pointing this out. His response: I'm aware of the guidelines. I'm also aware that we have production targets to meet. Maintenance says they can fix it by Friday. Until then, the alternate station is adequate. It was Tuesday. This was the moment something crystallized in my mind. Marcus didn't actually care about safety or compliance or any of the things he constantly lectured us about. He cared about looking good. He cared about his numbers, his metrics, his reports that he sent up to corporate. The alley. That evening, I ended up venting to Tom, our quality assurance manager. Tom was in his late 50s, had been in pharma for 30 years, and had exactly 0 fucks left to give about politics. He told it like it was, and management mostly left him alone because quality had the authority to shut down any line, any time, if they saw a compliance issue. We were in his office, and I was pacing, ranting about the eye wash situation. He's going to get someone hurt, I said. And then what? Then we'll have an OSHA investigation, possibly an FDA finding during the next audit, and someone will have actually been injured. But hey, at least we'll have hit our production targets for this week, right? Tom leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, watching me with an amused expression. You know what your problem is? He said. Marcus? No. Well, Yes, but more specifically, you're not following procedures. I stopped pacing. What, Tom? I follow every. No, you don't. He pulled out a thick binder from his shelf. Our site's safety SOP manual. He thumped it down on his desk. Section 4.2.3. If any emergency safety equipment is found to be non-functional or inadequate, the affected area must be immediately cordoned off and all work stopped until the equipment is restored to full functionality. Marcus said. I don't care what Marcus said. The SOP says what it says. And Section 1.5 says that in any conflict between production demands and safety requirements, safety takes precedence. Any employee can halt operations if they believe a safety concern exists. I stared at the manual. If I shut down the line, you'd be following the SOP exactly as written. Marcus would lose his mind. Tom shrugged. Marcus doesn't get to override safety procedures. That's literally not within his authority. Only I can approve continued operations with a safety deviation, and only if I document a formal risk assessment and mitigation plan. He smiled, which I would not do, because a broken eye wash station is not an acceptable risk. Something clicked in my head. A beautiful, terrible idea. Tom, I said slowly. We have a lot of SOPs. Hundreds. And they're all mandatory, right? We're required to follow them? That's what standard operating procedure means, yes. So if Marcus wants everything done by the book, Tom's smile widened, then everything should be done by the book. The plan forms. I went home that night and did something I'd never done before. I actually read our SOPs. Not skimmed them during training, not referenced them when I needed to look something up. I actually sat down and read them cover to cover. Let me tell you, when you actually read these things, you realize how absolutely insane they are. Don't get me wrong, most of the requirements make sense in isolation. But nobody actually follows all of them, all the time, exactly as written. That's not how work actually gets done in the real world. You use common sense, you understand the intent behind the procedure, and you apply it reasonably. But Marcus didn't want reasonable. Marcus wanted compliance, documentation, everything by the book. So that's what I'd give him. I started making a list. Some highlights. SOP ENV005, Environmental Monitoring. Required daily temperature and humidity readings at 6 specific locations on the production floor, documented within 15 minutes of the start of each shift. We did this, but usually just grabbed all 6 readings whenever we got around to it in the first hour. But the SOP specifically said, within 15 minutes of shift start, and readings must be taken in the sequence specified, which zigzagged across the entire production floor, and a minimum of 2 minutes must elapse between readings to ensure equipment stabilization. So that's 12 minutes just walking around taking readings, assuming you hustle. SOP Prod 018, Pre-Production Line Verification. Before starting any production, the supervisor must verify 43 separate items on each production line. We did this, but usually visually scanned things while the techs were setting up. The checklist was more of a formality. But the SOP said, each item must be individually verified and initialed by the supervisor, with any deviations documented before proceeding. It also specified that certain verifications required physically touching or manipulating the equipment, not just looking at it. That's about 30 to 45 minutes per line if you do every single item individually, by the letter. SOP Safety 012, Personal Protective Equipment Verification. Supervisors must verify that each employee is wearing appropriate PPE before they enter the production area. We did this, but it was a quick visual check. The SOP said verification must include documentation of PPE type, condition, and proper fit for each employee, with supervisor signature confirming compliance. That's a couple minutes per person. With 20 techs, there's another 40 minutes. SOPCOM 003, Shift Communications. The outgoing supervisor must conduct a comprehensive handover meeting with the incoming supervisor, reviewing all batch records, deviation logs, equipment status reports, personnel status, and any other relevant information. We usually did this as a 5 to 10 minute informal chat, hitting the highlights. The SOP specified this must be documented in detail, with both supervisors signing and dating the handover record, and the incoming supervisor must ask standardized handover questions from a list of about 30 questions. There's another 30 minutes. I could go on, and on, and on. The realization. The beautiful thing I realized was this. If I actually followed every single SOP exactly as written, I would spend approximately 10 to 12 hours of my 12-hour shift just on mandatory checks, verifications, and documentation. That would leave maybe 1 to 2 hours for actual supervision of production. Which meant production would slow to a crawl. Which meant we'd miss our targets. Which meant Marcus would freak out. And here's the kicker. He couldn't do anything about it, because I'd be following the procedures exactly. The same procedures he was constantly hammering us about. The same procedures that he said were non-negotiable. If it's in the SOP, you do it. No exceptions. His own words. I spent the next few days casually confirming my understanding with Tom. Hey Tom, quick question about the environmental monitoring SOP. He'd flip open the procedure, we'd read through it together, and he'd confirm. Yes, that's what it says. Yes, you're technically required to do it that way. Of course, he'd add with a straight face, most people use reasonable judgment about which requirements are critical and which are more aspirational. But if someone wanted to follow it to the letter, well, that would certainly be compliant. By the end of the week, I had my plan. I'd follow every single procedure, exactly as written. Setting the stage. On Monday morning, I came in an hour early. I needed to review all the procedures one more time and prepare my documentation templates. Marcus, coincidentally, was also in early. He stopped by my desk in the supervisor's office. Glad to see you're taking initiative, he said. Coming in early shows dedication. Just wanted to make sure I'm following all the procedures correctly, I said, gesturing to the stack of SOP binders on my desk. I've been reviewing them over the weekend. Want to make sure I'm not missing anything. His eyes lit up. This was his dream. An employee who actually cared about procedures. That's exactly the attitude I want to see, he said. Too many people treat SOPs as suggestions. They're requirements. They're how we maintain compliance. Absolutely, I agreed. In fact, I was thinking, we should probably be more rigorous about following them. Exactly as written, I mean. Precisely. He was practically glowing. That's what I've been trying to instill in this organization. Discipline. Rigor. So if I follow every procedure to the letter, that's what you want? Of course. That's what they're there for. Great. Just wanted to confirm. I smiled. I'd hate to get accused of not doing my job. He missed the edge in my voice entirely. Keep up this attitude, and we'll get along just fine. After he left, I took a deep breath. Here we go. Day 1. The slow down begins. My shift started at 6 a.m. Normally, I'd roll in around 5:55, check in with the night shift supervisor, and we'd have production running by 6:15 or so. Not today. At exactly 6 a.m., I began my environmental monitoring readings. Location 1. By the Line 1 equipment staging area. I pulled out my calibrated thermometer and hygrometer. The SOP specified which instruments to use, waited 2 minutes for stabilization, as required, took the reading, and carefully documented it in the logbook. Then I walked to location 2, clear across the production floor. 2-minute wait, reading, documentation, location 3, and so on. At 6:19 a.m., I finished the environmental monitoring. Right on schedule. The procedure really did take that long when you followed it exactly. Next. Shift communications handover. I sat down with Gary, the night shift supervisor, and pulled out the standardized handover questionnaire. All 30 questions. What are you doing? Gary asked. Comprehensive shift handover, I said. SOP COMM 003. Question 1. Are there any active batch records currently in process? We finished everything. It's all in the. I need you to answer the questions, Gary. For the documentation. He stared at me. Are you serious? Marcus has been very clear about following procedures. I'm just making sure we're compliant. Gary, who'd been dealing with his own Marcus-related headaches on night shift, got a funny look on his face. Then he smiled slowly. Right, compliance. Question 1. No, there are no active batch records currently in process. I wrote it down. Question 2. Are there any open deviation reports or quality events that require handover? We went through all 30 questions. I documented his answers word for word. We both signed and dated the handover record. It was 6:47 a.m. Next. PPE verification for all personnel. I called each of my 20 techs over one at a time. I checked their safety glasses, proper type? Check. Condition? Good. Fit? Verified. Their lab coats. Their gloves. Their hairnets. Their shoe covers. I documented each one on the PPE verification form. By 7:35 a.m., everyone was verified and documented. Now, pre-production line verification. I started with line 1. Item by item down the 43-point checklist. I didn't just look, I physically verified. Checked that valves were in the correct positions by touching them. Verified that calibration stickers were current by checking each date individually. Confirmed that cleaning logs were complete by reading every entry. Marcus walked by around 8:15 a.m. Why isn't line 1 running yet? He asked. Pre-production verification, I said, not looking up from the checklist. I was on item 28 of 43. SOP PROD 018. I'm almost done with line 1, then I need to do line 2. We should have started production an hour ago. I know. The environmental monitoring took longer than I expected. And the shift handover. And the PPE checks. But I'm following all the procedures, just like you wanted. I looked up at him and smiled. Documentation is how we maintain standards, right? His eye twitched slightly. Just get production started. Absolutely. As soon as I complete the pre-production verification. We can't start production without completing the checklist. That would be a critical deviation. He walked away. I finished line 1 at 8:47 a.m. Then did line 2, finished at 9:23 a.m. We started production 3.5 hours late. The ripples begin. By lunchtime, Marcus was in my office. What happened this morning? He demanded. We're 3 batches behind schedule. I pulled out my documentation. I followed all the SOPs exactly. Here's my environmental monitoring log, completed within 15 minutes of shift start, as required. Here's the shift handover documentation, all standardized questions answered and recorded. Here's my PPE verification forms, all 20 employees properly verified. And here are my pre-production checklists, all 86 items verified across both lines. I pushed the stack of paperwork across the desk to him. I'm doing exactly what you asked. Following every procedure. No exceptions. He flipped through the documentation. It was flawless. Every box checked, every signature present, every timestamp accurate. He struggled for words. This is excessive. It's what's written in the SOPs, I said calmly. I can show you. I've been reviewing them all weekend to make sure I understand exactly what's required. Nobody follows them this literally. You wrote up David for having his phone in his pocket. You investigated Mike for a 15-minute time discrepancy. You told me policy is policy and we don't make exceptions. I leaned forward. So I'm not making exceptions. I'm following the policies. All of them. Exactly as written. His face was turning red. The intent of the procedures. The intent doesn't matter though, does it? You said if it's not documented, it didn't happen. You said we need discipline and rigor. So that's what I'm doing. Disciplined, rigorous compliance with every procedure. You're deliberately sabotaging production. I'm following the SOPs. Are you saying the SOPs are wrong? I tilted my head innocently. Because if they're wrong, we should probably revise them. That's going to require a change control process, though. SOP QMS 007. That usually takes about 3 months for approval. He stared at me. I could see the wheels turning. He wanted to discipline me, but he couldn't. I was doing exactly what he'd been demanding everyone do. Figure out how to go faster, he finally said. I'll do my best, I replied. Within the requirements of the procedures, of course. Day 2. I add more layers. Tuesday, I decided to get even more thorough. The chemical inventory SOP, SOP MAT 009, required supervisors to verify adequate quantities of all required materials prior to production start. We normally did this by checking that the materials were staged and trusting our materials coordinator to have ordered enough. But the SOP said, verify adequate quantities. It didn't say, trust that someone else verified. So I counted every single chemical container. We need 47 liters of reagent A for today's production. Let me count the bottles. That's 12 bottles at 4 liters each. 48 liters. Good, that's adequate. Document it. We need 23 kilos of excipient B. These are 5 kilo bags. Let me count. That's 5 bags, so 25 kilos total. Document it. This added another 45 minutes to my morning routine. Then I discovered SOP Equip 015, Equipment Operational Verification. Before starting production, the supervisor must verify that all equipment is functioning within operational parameters. How do you verify that? Well, the SOP was helpful here. It listed specific checks for each piece of equipment. Mixers must be run empty for 5 minutes while monitoring vibration and temperature. Pumps must be tested with water. Filling machines must be cycled through a test sequence. This wasn't just looking at equipment and saying, "Yep, looks good." This was actual operational testing. Another hour. We started production at 11:30 a.m. Marcus came down to the floor at noon, absolutely livid. "This is unacceptable." "I agree," I said. "These procedures are really time-consuming. We should probably streamline them." "You know what I mean." "Do I?" I was checking off my hourly production documentation, SOP Prod 025, production monitoring documentation. "I'm just following the SOPs. Which specific procedure would you like me to not follow?" "That's not. You're being deliberately obtuse." "I'm being compliant. Would you like me to document your instruction to not follow a specific SOP?" "Because I'll need that in writing for my deviation report." He stormed off. The crew catches on. That afternoon, I pulled my lead technicians aside, David, Sarah, and Miguel, and explained what I was doing. "You're fucking with him," David said with dawning delight. "I'm following procedures exactly," I corrected. "But if you all wanted to also follow procedures exactly, well, I certainly couldn't tell you not to." Sarah grinned. "There's an SOP for equipment cleaning that's insane. We usually just wipe things down between batches, but technically we're supposed to do a full documented cleaning verification." "Which takes?" I asked. "If we do it exactly right? About 2 hours." "Huh," I said, "that would really slow things down." "It really would," she agreed. Miguel was already pulling up SOPs on his tablet. "Oh man, the gowning procedure. We're supposed to verify that we can't see any of our skin or hair before entering the production area. And we're supposed to have a buddy check us." "Buddy checks?" I asked. "Yep. One person can't verify their own gowning. You need a second person to verify and document." We all looked at each other. "It would be a shame," David said slowly, "if we all started following procedures exactly." "A real shame," I agreed. Day 3. The Avalanche. Wednesday morning, my entire crew was on board. Everyone showed up 15 minutes early, because the gowning procedure, SOP Safety 008, required buddy verification, and you couldn't start that until your buddy arrived, and it took about 10 minutes per person to properly document. We created a gowning assembly line. People paired off, carefully checked each other's PPE, filled out verification forms, swapped roles. It took an hour to get everyone properly gowned and documented. Then we started the cleaning verifications. After every batch, and we ran multiple batches per day, equipment had to be cleaned. And now we were doing it properly. 2-hour full breakdown, cleaning, and verification. With documentation. With photos, the SOP mentioned photos, so we took them. With residue swabs, also mentioned in the SOP. Production crawled. And here's the thing. Everyone was happier. We weren't stressed about Marcus randomly appearing and writing us up for stupid violations. We were following every procedure exactly. We were bulletproof. "He can't say shit to us," David said while we waited for his cleaning verification to be approved by quality. Yes, the SOP required quality approval for cleaning verification. "We're doing exactly what the procedures say." "It's kind of zen," Sarah added. "Like, I'm not worried about anything. I just follow the checklist. Step by step. Takes forever, but it's all documented perfectly." Miguel laughed. "My favorite is the break documentation. Did you know we're supposed to log our breaks in real time?" I hadn't known that. I looked it up. SOP Hour 003. All employee breaks must be documented with start time, end time, and supervisor initials to ensure compliance with labor regulations. Which meant every time someone took a break, and we got 2 15-minute breaks plus a 30-minute lunch, I had to document it. For 20 people, that's 60 break documentation entries per day. "I'll add it to my list," I said. The emergency meeting. Thursday morning, I was called into a meeting. Marcus, the plant manager, his boss, a guy named Robert, the HR manager, and Tom from quality. Marcus had clearly been complaining. Loudly. "Let me get straight to the point," Robert said. He was in his early 60s, a career pharma guy who'd seen it all. Marcus tells me you've been deliberately slowing down production by over-applying SOPs. I've been following SOPs exactly as written, I said. I'd brought my documentation. I dropped 3 binders on the conference table. This is just the last 3 days. Every procedure followed exactly. Every step documented. Would you like to review it? Tom, from quality, was trying very hard not to smile. Robert flipped open one of the binders. Looked at my environmental monitoring logs. My PPE verifications. My equipment checks. This is, he paused. Very thorough. Thank you. Perhaps too thorough? I'm confused, I said. Are the SOPs incorrect? Because if they're requiring things we don't need to do, we should revise them. I'd be happy to participate in that process. Marcus jumped in. The SOPs are fine. You're just being deliberately inefficient. I'm following the procedures you insisted we follow, I said, turning to him. You told me. Policy is policy. No exceptions. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Documentation is how we maintain standards. Those were your exact words. You're twisting. Am I? I pulled out my phone. I've been keeping notes. Would you like me to read back some of your quotes? The HR manager held up a hand. Let's keep this constructive. She looked at me. Obviously, we need to balance compliance with efficiency. What would you suggest? I think we need to be realistic about which SOP requirements are critical and which are overly prescriptive, I said. I think we need to trust supervisors and technicians to use good judgment rather than treating every minor issue like a catastrophic failure. And I think we need leadership that understands the difference between compliance and common sense. I looked directly at Marcus on that last part. Robert was nodding slowly. Tom, from a quality perspective, what's your take? Well, Tom said, legally speaking, if we have a procedure, we're supposed to follow it. That's what we tell the FDA during audits. We can't really tell our employees to follow SOPs except when they're inconvenient. He paused. That said, many of our SOPs are aspirational. They were written to cover every possible scenario, which makes them somewhat impractical for day-to-day operations. So they need to be revised, Robert said. That would be a significant undertaking, Tom replied. We have hundreds of SOPs. Properly revising them could take a year or more. In the meantime, he shrugged. There was a long silence. Finally, Robert spoke. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to form a committee to review all production and safety SOPs for practicality. Tom, you'll chair it. I want recommendations in 6 months. He turned to me. In the meantime, I'm authorizing you to use reasonable professional judgment in applying SOP requirements. Focus on safety, quality, and compliance with regulatory requirements. Everything else, use common sense. And my daily reports? I asked. Simplify them. 1 page, high-level summary. And the real-time batch record verification? Go back to the old system. Periodic review. I nodded. And if someone on my crew has their phone in their pocket because their wife is pregnant? Robert looked at Marcus. We're not writing people up for phones in pockets unless they're actively using them in production areas. Marcus looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. The aftermath. The meeting ended. I went back to the production floor and told my crew we could go back to normal operations, reasonable compliance, not excessive compliance. The cheering was loud enough that people from other departments came to see what happened. Production returned to normal levels. We hit our targets. Morale improved dramatically. Marcus, however, didn't let it go. Over the next 2 months, he tried to find other ways to assert control. He'd show up on the floor looking for violations. He'd scrutinize our documentation. He'd question our decisions in front of the crew, trying to undermine our authority. But here's the thing. We had Robert's backing now. And Tom's. And frankly, the entire crew's. Every time Marcus tried something, we'd comply exactly, and document the hell out of it. He wanted us to reorganize our chemical storage? Sure thing. Here's the 47-page risk assessment we completed, as required by SOP SAFETY 019. Here's the training documentation for all affected employees. Here's the change control documentation. Here's the validation protocol. Oh, this will take 3 weeks to implement properly, by the way. Malicious compliance became our department's standard operating procedure when dealing with Marcus. The breaking point came during an internal audit in June. Marcus had insisted on personally conducting part of the audit of our department, his way of trying to find ammunition against us. During the audit, he asked one of my techs, David, remember him? Why he wasn't wearing a specific type of safety glasses that Marcus claimed were required. David, bless him, pulled out the SOP. SOP SAFETY011 specifies that safety glasses must meet NCZ 87.1 standards. These glasses, he tapped his frames, are certified to that standard. See, the marking is right here on the frame. I think those are the wrong style, Marcus insisted. The SOP doesn't specify a style, only a certification standard, David replied calmly. Would you like to see the certification documentation? I have it in my training file. I'm the manager, I'm telling you those are wrong. If you believe the SOP is inadequate, we should probably submit a deviation report and change control, David said. I'd be happy to help you draft it. Of course, we'll need to document why you believe NC-certified glasses are insufficient, and what additional requirements should be added. I was standing nearby, watching this unfold. I didn't intervene. David had this handled. Marcus's face went red. He started to argue, but the external auditor who was shadowing him, because this was technically practice for our upcoming FDA audit, cleared her throat. The employee appears.